Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Fundamentals. I'm Adam Holzberg, joined alongside with April Kushner. And today we have a special guest to talk about technology and nonprofits, and specifically why technology may fail within your nonprofit. So happy to be joined alongside today with Melanie Meyer. She is the Vice President of Partnerships at Tech Impact. And Tech Impact is a very unique company because they are one of the only nonprofits who specializes in IT. So they're a nonprofit servicing nonprofits. So Melanie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me today. And just a little bit about Tech Impact. We were formed to serve nonprofits. That is our only mission. And anywhere that technology touch an organization, whether it's in your IT infrastructure, security, data, systems, digital services, our organization is built to serve those needs of nonprofits.
And as a nonprofit, I'm sure you're very familiar with the needs of a nonprofit.
Very, very familiar with the needs of a nonprofit. I have spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector. My first 20 years were within an organization supporting their technical data management marketing needs. So really well versed on how nonprofits operate and really translating technology to business functions of a nonprofit.
Yeah, that's great that you saw that side of the business before you moved into your current role.
Very beneficial in really discerning what it is exactly a nonprofit is looking for, because sometimes it's not always clear, but living
Mhm.
and understanding the role really helps me to really dissect where the nonprofit is really struggling with technology.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, great.
So Melanie, when we're talking about nonprofits, how do they build an organization of culture that values security, um, when it comes to potentially cyber attacks or things of that nature? Like, how do they build that culture that really values protect their information?
I really think the culture begins at leadership, and leadership understanding the risk of not having a full in-depth security practice. Again, I always say you're not going to tackle it in one day. Protecting yourself against cyber risk really is a building block, and it's really hitting at the key strategic areas, the most simple to employ, and then building upon that block. I think the one thing, and you're going to hear this over and over again, is education. That the first line of defense is really educating your staff on what to look for in terms of cyber attacks like phishing. We use a product here called Know Before Cybersecurity Awareness and Phishing. And by, you know, the ability to educate staff on what to look for
Mhm.
and ensure that they have the right information to help protect. I think 80% of cyber breaches are because of someone clicking on a link that wasn't supposed to be linked.
Mhm.
But then also we can put technical components in place to try if education fails. Again, we're going to create roadblocks to try and prevent further attacks. And it's really a comprehensive look at the organization. Some basic stuff like turning on multi-factor authentication is key to anything, protecting your email and your file share to have individuals authenticate who they are, whether it be via cell phone or another avenue, before they are able to get access in is the number one thing. It's the number one thing we see nonprofits struggle with because they don't want that roadblock to get their work done, but it's the most critical in terms of security. And then really, understanding your compliances and taking it from there to protect data and all that. But again, it starts with leadership focus on attention. And unfortunately, sometimes that attention comes after there's been a major breach. And so I think it's just becoming aware and the leadership starting at the top.
Mhm.
So when you
Always
talk
best to
about
be
leadership,
proactive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When speaking about leadership, what do they often most underestimate when it comes to technology and data security risk? Is it education, or is it, as you mentioned before, or is it something else that they're overlooking?
Education, but also sometimes organizations see maybe protecting against cyber attacks is sometimes they might think it's out of their threshold for cost, that it might be very expensive to implement, and that's not always true. There are things you can easily implement that are not expensive. It's just in general best practices. Example, keeping workstations, computers up to date with the most recent operating system, making sure that you're purchasing business grade equipment that has pro operating um, systems, not home. Don't run to, some retailer and just buy something because it's cheap. Making sure that you have the right antivirus and protection tools on those devices. So keeping them up to date, keeping them secured, and then also investing in your online cloud solutions, whether you're Microsoft, Google, or whatever, what protocols can you put in place? And then also ensuring that your data systems, any CRMs that you're using, donor databases, all that, that you're looking at security holistically and all the valuable data that you hold.
Mhm. Is there like a one size fits all of recommendations you'd have for nonprofits, whether they're smaller or larger? Is there like a base of kind of what they should be doing and implementing? And then how do you kind of scale that based on the size of the organization?
You would think that it's not necessarily the size, it's when I meet with the organization and I'm trying to understand where their struggles are or where their technology is, it's about the mission and the clients that they serve. And
Mhm.
do they have compliances? Are they holding on to key data? There's always those baseline security practices, right? Multi-factor authentication, cutting down on the amount of phishing attempts, educating your staff, and then there's higher compliance security that needs to be addressed. If you're a domestic violence center and you have client data, your staff need to be trained, your technologies need to be different, your security needs to look different. If you're HIPAA compliant and you're holding on to client medical data, your technology is going to look a lot different than somebody who, say, just um, is advocating for a cause or
Mhm.
environmental, maybe. It really depends on what data you're holding and where you want to be. But there are always basics, workstations updated, AV tools, anti-phishing, multi-factor authentication, and then you get to a baseline, and then really from there you look towards meeting compliances and tightening your security.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know what you mean about having to be HIPAA compliant and depends a lot on the mission.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Yeah, with so many different nonprofits, there's so many different needs when it comes to technology. What needs to be protected, different compliance rules. So it's a lot out
And
there.
not even from the client perspective, also your employee perspective, right? Because I was talking, again, I'm going back to a domestic violence organization, and their staff was using their personal cell phones to talk to victims. That left them open to who, so it's also about protecting your staff and those doing the important work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, we're talking about why tech could fail in a nonprofit organization. So, what are some key elements of a successful technology policy for a nonprofit?
This was one thing that was interesting is we did a bunch of surveys and assessments of nonprofits because we really wanted to understand where there was gap in the sector and how we could help fill that gap. We learned that most nonprofits did not have a computer use or any kind of technology use guide. So we took a step back and said, how can we fill this need in nonprofits and help them understand the importance of putting a policy in place? You need it in order for staff to know what they do. Again, it's not just the computer use, but it's like, where do we save our files? What are the expectations of the organization in terms of an employee and we found it was lacking. So maybe you can put this link in later, but we built an AI computer policy tool that really is a AI-driven questionnaire. Goes into everything from acceptable use to some, we find a lot of bring your own device organizations where they're trying to, they have a lot of employees using their personal devices accessing the network. It goes everything from data security to AI policy, which is really critical to have an AI use, where the information is going in AI and have those policies. So it's on our website, it's free to use, and it's open to any nonprofits.
Great.
Yeah, that's a really helpful tool.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think the biggest takeaway from this question, Adam, is put the policies in place.
To have the policy in the first place, be successful.
Right. And then that's a general, right? Then you're going to want to go into incident response, disaster recovery as you start to grow and evolve your
Right.
stack of policies. Those are policies you definitely should follow through with.
Mhm. Yeah, great policies to have. So Melanie, I was curious, are there any unique ways that you're seeing nonprofits use technology to help further their missions or be more efficient in their everyday work?
Oh, yes. With this surge of AI, and the attention on it, organizations, some of them are ahead of the fold. But I think it's also understanding efficiencies, whether it's AI or automation. And I think those two get kind of put together in terms
Mhm.
of technology use.
Yep.
So some cool things organizations are doing. Organizations, they chase a lot of dollars. They put together a lot of proposals for funding. So by being able to automate and take that data in order to go out and seek additional funding, a lot of that has been automated or used AI to build those funding requests. A lot of organizations, especially if they're on the larger side, we see them automating a lot of processes that take a lot of handholding, like HR, from the time somebody might be interviewed, hired, to all the
Mhm.
systems and everything that needs to be done with a new employee. It's fully automated and they build the processes out. Currently working with an organization right now, very cool organization. They do a lot of surveys of nonprofit boards
Mhm.
for board development to understand where the board is, to come back to leadership to say where they can strengthen the board. They are automating that entire process from the distribution of the surveys to the data analysis that then comes back. But really, nonprofits should be looking at ways to automate a lot of those those from volunteer management, bringing on a volunteer, doing training. There's a ton of opportunity for nonprofits to leverage automation and AI.
Mm. Yeah, that was one of the
Yes.
things I was most curious about. If there's any, neat creative ways that they're using technology.
There are some that are ahead of the game and some that need to catch up. I would my rule of thumb is you should focus some time. What is taking us a lot of time? And then maybe engaging a
Mhm.
consultant or an expert to kind of look over that and say, "Hey, how can AI and automation help aid in your work?"
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Whatever make your life easier, right?
All about making life easier, but
Yeah.
also keeping it secure and within the
Yes.
network. With the use of all these AI tools, you really need to understand. And my rule of thumb is paid is secure, free, not secure. So be careful where you're putting your data.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Good advice.
So one final question. So if nonprofit leaders, if they could change, if you could tell them to change one thing about how they approach technology, what would be the one thing that make the biggest difference?
Think strategically about technology, have a strategic plan, understand where you are and the path you want to go moving forward. Um, and really pull in resources to help. Don't see it as a cost, rather a mission enabler. Technology can
Mhm.
help you aid in your mission if you think strategically about it. Um, and take the time to understand, the one thing I think nonprofits can do the most is inventory what you're using. What are you using it for?
Mhm.
And then what is working and what is not working?
Mhm.
And where could your lives be easier? What data systems don't talk to one another? And if there were key integrations that were essential, could aid in the work. Are you entering data entry 3 times? That's an issue. Um, but then also we educate a ton of nonprofits. We see nonprofits of every size. And really this, and I don't want to say smaller ones, but those that maybe have rapid growth or don't understand all the cloud solutions and the benefits available to nonprofits and licensing, but you're still going to have to invest dollars to get to where you need to go. And any technology project with nonprofits too is you have to be change ready. You have to say, how is this technology going to aid in our work? And then adopt for that with your staff, right? People are used to their day-to-day habits of coming in and doing stuff. So if you're going to tackle any project, you're going to make any improvements, just make sure you clearly communicate the benefits to staff and so that they can work past that pain point and that change management to understand why you're making the technology changes you are.
Mhm. And I'd imagine it's a good practice too, is when you're going to do that assessment, kind of having people from different levels throughout the organization kind of give their feedback where they think they could be more efficient, something that's tedious, something I wish I could change if I could. Kind of collectively thinking about that before you move forward with, hey, I think we can change that and do something.
I always suggest a survey. Like if we do a strategic tech plan for a nonprofit, we always start with the staff survey. So we
Mhm.
understand everybody's pain points, any, everywhere that they're struggling. And also we get, you know, we learned this with COVID. Nonprofit staff are gritty. They're going to get their work done any way that they can. If you look at it, most nonprofits had servers in place, their files were on-prem, they had desktops for staff. COVID hit. I'm telling you, those nonprofit workers, they moved that stuff to the cloud as fast as they could, whether it was their personal Gmail, whether it
Mhm.
was any other cloud solution they were comfortable with, so they could continue their work at home and keep doing the work that's so critical. But I think with the availability of all these cloud solutions and the different ways that you can do work, again, it goes back to having policies in place, but also understanding where your staff is working and doing the day-to-day work. And I think sometimes that gets a little lost.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great that you have that survey.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
All right. Well, Melanie, thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge of nonprofit IT as a nonprofit. We really appreciate it.